Video calls are meant to connect us, but sometimes they become the last thing someone ever does. In this video, we'll look at 5 real stories where people died during a video call. These weren't just tragic moments. They were witnessed live by friends, family, or co-workers, turning normal, everyday calls into something unforgettable and horrifying. Each case is different. Some are accidents. Some raise serious questions. But all of them leave us wondering the same thing. What really happened on the other side of the screen?
Today, the start of the trial of Dwight Flanigan, charged in the murder of his 2-year-old daughter, Zavia. The case goes back to March 20th, 2023. That's when prosecutors say Flanigan was upset with his girlfriend and mother of Zavia, Kirsten Watson, believing she was seeing another man.
It was March 20th, 2023 in Houston, Texas. What started as a normal day quickly turned into something unimaginable. 2-year-old Zavia Flanigan had just been picked up from daycare by her father, 26-year-old Dwight Flanigan. No one knew it then, but it would be the last time anyone saw her alive. Dwight and Zavia's mother, Kirsten Watson, had been separated for a while. The breakup had ended badly, and things only got worse afterward. Dwight had grown jealous and angry, convinced Kirsten had moved on with someone else. That morning, Kirsten was working at a Walmart in North Harris County when Dwight stormed in. He grabbed their daughter and demanded the passcode to Kirsten's phone, threatening to hurt Zavia if she didn't comply. Terrified, Kirsten gave him the code, hoping it would calm him down. But it didn't. He took the phone and Zavia and ran. Kirsten immediately contacted the police. She told them Dwight had taken Zavia before, but this time felt different. This time felt worse. Soon after, Dwight led police on a dangerous 45-minute high-speed chase through Harris County. He weaved through traffic, crashed into cars, and drove the wrong way down streets, all while Zavia sat in the car, unrestrained and in danger. During the chase, Dwight did something that would leave a permanent scar. He FaceTimed Kirsten. What she saw on the screen was every parent's nightmare. He began hurting their daughter in real time. Kirsten screamed. She begged him to stop. She told him she loved him and reminded him that it was his daughter. But Dwight didn't stop. At one point, he said, "You only love that man. This is what you did to her." Kirsten's father, Curtis Watson, was also on a call during the incident. He later said that Dwight showed him the lifeless body of his granddaughter through the phone. He described the pain he felt in that moment as something no one should ever have to experience. Police were able to track Dwight using the phone's location. They eventually caught up to him, but he refused to stop. He kept driving until finally crashing the vehicle. After a tense 20-minute standoff, SWAT officers arrested him. Zavia was rushed to the hospital, but the injuries she suffered, both from the crash and what happened inside the car, were too severe. She didn't make it. Kirsten had tried to warn authorities before. She filed reports. She told them he was unstable. She said she feared he might do something violent, but it wasn't enough. Now, she was left with an unimaginable loss, the kind of grief no parent should ever have to endure. As the investigation unfolded, more disturbing details emerged. Court records revealed the FaceTime video, where Kirsten could be heard screaming for her daughter's life. Dwight's legal team claimed Zavia's death was caused by the crash, but the jury didn't believe it. They found him guilty of intentionally taking her life. During the trial, Dwight's behavior remained erratic. At one point, he lunged at a news camera and had to be restrained in court. Eventually, he was sentenced to life in prison. On what would have been Zavia's 3rd birthday, Kirsten and her family gathered to honor her memory. They released balloons into the sky, holding on to the love they had for a little girl whose life ended far too soon. Her story is painful, it's disturbing, and it will never be forgotten.
Tonight, we are talking to the family of a Texas teenager who died in a freak accident.
14-year-old Madison Coe was electrocuted while she was handling her cell phone in a bathroom.
It was 2023 in the quiet town of Montefiglione, nestled in southern Italy. 16-year-old Maria Antonetta Coutinho had just wrapped up her schoolwork and decided to relax, drawing herself a warm bath. She wasn't alone, though, not really. She was on a video call with her best friend, Fabi, chatting, laughing, just being teenagers. Her phone sat nearby, plugged in and charging, as they talked about nothing and everything. But what neither of them knew was that those would be their last words together. At some point during the call, Maria's phone slipped from her hand and dropped straight into the bathwater. And just like that, everything changed. The phone, still charging, sparked a short circuit the moment it hit the water. Electricity surged through the bath and through Maria. It happened fast, too fast. On the other end of the line, Fabi was still watching, still listening, and then silence. The connection dropped. At first, she probably thought it was just a glitch, but when Maria didn't answer, fear crept in. Fabi tried calling again. Nothing. She called emergency services, her voice trembling as she told them something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. When responders arrived at Maria's home, they found her in the bathtub, unmoving, gone. The water that was supposed to comfort her had become deadly, transformed by one small, fatal mistake. Her parents weren't home at the time, but they returned to find a scene no parent should ever have to face: a home filled with silence, a bath that would never be the same, a daughter they would never hold again. Authorities began an investigation. The local carabinieri from Mirabella Eclano started piecing together the chain of events. Emergency responders gave their reports. The burns on Maria's body suggested she may have instinctively reached for the phone as it fell. Maybe she thought she could catch it. Maybe she just reacted. News of Maria's death spread fast through Montefiglione. Her family was well known. Her father owned a local butcher shop. Everyone in town knew them, and now they all shared in the grief. Fabi was devastated. She posted a tribute on TikTok, pouring out her pain, her confusion, her heartbreak. She talked about her green eyes, about the empty chair that would now sit untouched at school. Sadly, Maria wasn't the first. In 2020, a 15-year-old girl in France named Tiffin died the exact same way. A year earlier, in Amsterdam, a 13-year-old girl suffered a shock from her charging phone in the bath. She survived, but barely. Memory loss, long recovery, scars that don't fade. Experts have warned us for years. Organizations like Electrical Safety First have practically begged people to be careful with devices around water, especially when they're plugged in. But warnings often sound like background noise, until someone like Maria becomes the headline. The investigation into her death continued, but for her family, the answers didn't matter as much as the silence that followed, the stillness of her room, the sound of a home forever changed, the future stolen by one tragic moment. And for the people of Montefiglione, the town that once felt untouched by tragedy, life no longer felt so safe. Maria's death wasn't just an accident. It was a reminder, a gut punch, that the things we take for granted can turn deadly in seconds. It was May 21st, 2020 in Amityville, New York. A man named Dwight Powers, 72 years old, had logged into his regular Alcoholics Anonymous Zoom meeting, just like he'd done so many times before. The group was familiar, around 24 people, all seeking the same thing: support, connection, recovery. Dwight wasn't the type to say much. He was soft-spoken, gentle. Just being present in those meetings mattered to him. It was around noon, and everything seemed normal, and then everything changed. Dwight's screen suddenly shifted. His camera tilted slightly, then his figure disappeared. No one thought much of it at first. Maybe he'd just stepped away. Maybe his connection had dropped. These things happen on Zoom. But what happened next made hearts drop and pulses spike. A man entered the frame. He was naked, his movements strange and unsettling. The group stared, confused, then horrified, as the man began pulling sheets from the bed, spreading them across the floor. At first, it didn't register, but then someone realized what he was covering. It was Dwight. His body, still lifeless, partially visible beneath the sheets. The man was Thomas Scully Powers, Dwight's 32-year-old son. No one on the call could believe what they were seeing. It felt unreal, like a glitch, like a nightmare. Panic erupted in the Zoom chat. Some tried to call out. Others scrambled to contact the police. But there was a problem. No one knew exactly where Dwight lived. They only knew his name, his face, and what they had just witnessed. 10 minutes passed, then 15. It felt like hours. The camera was still on until Thomas suddenly noticed. He lunged toward the device and covered the lens. But by then, it was too late. Everyone had seen enough. By the time authorities arrived, Thomas tried to flee. He opened the door briefly, then slammed it shut and jumped out of a second-story window, vanishing into the neighborhood. His escape didn't last long. Police caught him about an hour later, bloodied and injured, near Ketchum Avenue and Cedar Street. What they found inside the house was worse than anyone had imagined. Dwight had been attacked with multiple kitchen knives. The scene was brutal. Investigators reported that Thomas stabbed his father approximately 15 times, in the neck, back, and torso. According to the Suffolk County District Attorney, Thomas later admitted he had to use several knives because they kept bending during the attack. The weight of that detail alone was almost too much to process. He had tried to clean up, hastily covering the body, moving things around, maybe hoping the Zoom call hadn't caught everything. But it had. The knives were recovered. The scene was documented. What the witnesses saw helped investigators piece together a horrifying timeline. Thomas Scully Powers was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. For those on that Zoom call, nothing would ever be the same. They had come looking for healing. Instead, they witnessed a man's final moments, powerless to stop it, unable to help, left with images they could never unsee. Some later spoke about what it was like, how at first they thought it was a tech glitch, then a prank, and then reality hit. The sheer helplessness of watching a crime unfold in real time, knowing you can't reach through the screen, can't call fast enough, can't stop what's already happening. As for why it happened, no one knows for sure. Police haven't shared many details about Thomas's motive. Was it planned? A sudden explosion of rage? Something deeper, darker? The answers remain unclear, but one thing is certain. What happened that day wasn't just a tragedy. It was a horror that no one on that call will ever forget. It was the morning hours of September 25th, 2022, in Kingston, southwest London. Inside Prism nightclub, the celebration was in full swing. Arabella Ashfield's sister had just turned 18, and the room was alive with music, laughter, and movement. Among the guests was 25-year-old James East, a business development executive from Swansea. He had come to celebrate with Arabella, his girlfriend of nearly a year and a half. At some point during the evening, James and Arabella became separated. She stayed inside with her sister and friends, assuming he'd just stepped out for air. No one thought anything of it. Not yet. Then her phone rang. It was James, FaceTiming her from outside. What she saw on that screen would haunt her forever. He was sitting alone on the cold stone edge of Kingston Bridge. His eyes were red, his voice quiet, trembling. Tears slipped down his face as he stared at her through the screen. "I'm sorry," he said. Before Arabella could speak, before she could even begin to understand what was happening, James leaned back. There was a splash. Her scream tore through the nightclub. She grabbed her sister's boyfriend and ran, through the streets, to the bridge, her heart pounding with disbelief and dread. But by the time she got there, the water was calm again. James was gone. She called the police. They found his trainers first, drifting quietly near the edge. It wasn't long after, around 4 a.m., that they found his body, face down, motionless in the cold black water. He was pulled into a lifeboat and rushed to Kingston Hospital, where doctors tried to save him. At 7 a.m., James was pronounced dead. The next call went to his mother, Sarah. Just the day before, she'd spoken to her son, wishing him luck as he trained for the London Marathon. She was supposed to see him soon to cheer him on. Instead, she had to travel to identify his body. A post-mortem revealed traces of a stimulant drug in his system, and a small bag of white powder was found near his phone. But the coroner ruled his death an accident. There was no strong evidence that alcohol or drugs played a major role. No note, no signs of planning. Dr. Anton Van Dellen, the coroner, believed James had simply lost his balance, a wrong move on the wrong night, one that no one saw coming. James had been in good spirits that night. There had been no warning signs, no hint that anything was wrong. Just a moment, fragile, fleeting, where something went terribly wrong. The news devastated everyone who knew him. James wasn't just another name in the headlines. He was full of life, full of love. He'd trained with football clubs like Leicester City. He'd studied finance and economics and landed a promising job at Tribe. He was going places. Arabella had brought light into his life. His mother said those 18 months were the happiest they'd ever seen him. The couple had just gotten a puppy. They were planning to move in together. They were building a future. And then, in a single moment, it was all gone. The grief rippled far beyond his family. Even his boss, who had known him for only 6 weeks, traveled to attend the funeral. "I knew he was special from the moment I interviewed him," he said. The chapel was full. Friends, colleagues, teammates, people whose lives James had touched in ways he probably never realized. Just days before the London Marathon, the one James had trained so hard for, Arabella and his sister Abigail laced up their shoes and ran. Not for the finish line, not for a medal. They ran for James. They ran for the man they loved, for the future he didn't get to live, and for a night that began with joy, but ended with a silence no one will ever forget.
A horrifying Zoom call.
The baby's back there crying. She's not answering or anything. We're calling her name. She's not talking or responding.
A Central Florida mother killed on camera. Tonight, Fox 35 hears from the horrified witnesses.
It was August 11th, 2021, in Altamonte Springs, Florida. Inside her apartment, 21-year-old Shamaya Lynn was doing what so many young parents had learned to juggle in recent years, working from home while caring for her children. She was on a Zoom call with co-workers, focused, calm, present. Her voice had that effortless rhythm of someone used to balancing chaos and professionalism. Her 2 toddlers were nearby, the background noise of motherhood, and then a sharp, deafening noise rang out. On the screen, her co-workers watched in real time as Shamaya froze, then fell backward in her chair. Then the sound of a baby crying. Panic surged through the Zoom call. At first, no one could make sense of what they'd seen, a glitch, a fall, but the look on her face before she dropped, it was something they couldn't shake. One co-worker didn't hesitate. She dialed 911, her voice trembling as she told the dispatcher she believed something horrible had just happened. When first responders burst into the apartment moments later, they found Shamaya still in her chair, unmoving, blood trailing down from a single wound to her head. The scene was almost too surreal to process. Her children, confused and crying, were still in the room. One of them, just 2 years old, had been the one to pull the trigger. The gun had been left loaded inside a child's Paw Patrol backpack, hidden in plain sight. The owner? Shamaya's boyfriend, Vondre Avery. She hadn't known it was there. It took only a second for the child to find it. A second of curiosity, a second of tragedy. The bullet ended her life. As investigators pieced together the chain of events, a chilling realization unfolded. This was no calculated crime, no drawn-out drama. This was a moment made possible by a gun that should never have been accessible. And it had happened while others watched, helpless, through a screen. Vondre came home shortly after the shooting. What he found would destroy him. Shamaya was slumped over, unresponsive, blood everywhere. He tried CPR, his voice cracking in terror as he called 911. She's bleeding. She's not responding. But it was too late. When officers arrived, they found more guns in the home. For safety, Vondre was placed in handcuffs on the spot. Not out of accusation, but because the scene was unpredictable. He was later charged with manslaughter and failure to secure a firearm. Officer Roberto Ruiz Jr. stood before the cameras days later, his message direct and solemn. Lock up your guns. Don't wait until tragedy knocks at your door. But the truth is, for Shamaya's family, tragedy didn't knock. It stormed in. The statistics are staggering. In 2020 alone, there were 369 unintentional shootings by children in the U.S., 142 of them fatal. Just days before Shamaya's death, a toddler in North Carolina accidentally shot and killed his father. A few months earlier, a mother was killed when her child found a handgun in her purse. Shamaya wasn't just a name in a headline. She was a young mother. She was balancing life and responsibility. She had dreams. She had plans. She had 2 babies who adored her. Now, they'll grow up with a memory shaped by other people's words, by photos, by stories, by the sound of her voice captured in old videos. The courtroom may decide how long Vandre Avery serves. Whether he's gone for 5 years or 15 won't change what happened. He'll carry the weight of that one decision, where he left the gun, for the rest of his life.